Hello and welcome to More Than Mondays, a podcast for believers by believers to encourage, challenge, and shift your perspective as you go throughout this week. On this week's episode, we have my friend Carter Howard talking to us a little bit more about what righteousness looks like for a believer. I hope you enjoy. Hey Carter, thank you so much for joining us this week on More Than Mondays. It is such an honor to have you here. Carter is the youth pastor at City Church Ventura. We met through our friend Tracy, who, if you've been an avid listener of More Than Mondays, is mentioned in all but one or two episodes.
Yes.
But Carter's a great friend of mine. We actually just got done hanging out, what was that, a week ago?
Yeah.
Dude,
yeah, last week was our hike on that Wednesday.
Yes, it was, and it was amazing.
It was.
That view. Well, anyway, Carter, thank you so much for taking some time to be with me and with us
Absolutely.
This week on More Than Mondays. And I want you to share more about yourself. What are your likes? What are your dislikes? What's going on in the world right now?
Yeah, well, I'd first like to say the Tracy comment, there's such truth to that. I probably, in most of my conversations, mention things that Tracy has told me, I think more than anyone. Than anyone. I mean, all the students in our youth group, they know who Tracy is just because I mention him so often. And so speaking of him, I room with Tracy and I live with there's a total of 4 of us, and moved down to Ventura 4 years ago. Did California Coast Bible College at the City Church for 2 years. And then after I graduated a few months later, they asked me to begin to pastor the youth group and the kids. And so that's what I've been doing for about almost the past 2 years. And so that's been amazing. It's also been really challenging. I had wanted to be a youth pastor since I was a sophomore in high school. And so
awesome.
the fact that I'm able to do that is an amazing honor and an amazing privilege. And so, yeah, I'm enjoying every second I have with the guys that I live with. I'm a huge sports fan. I'm an avid book reader. I love to go outside, anything outside, camping, hammocking, hiking, whatever it may be, going to the beach, the ocean. And I love food. Unfortunately, I can't taste right now because of this whole COVID thing, but I'm very much looking forward to when I can again.
Yes, that is a frustrating thing, I'm sure, where you have that lack of taste. But anyway, the Lord is definitely going to heal it completely so that you can taste whatever you want to taste by tomorrow morning at the latest. But man, I'm really actually super excited about this conversation that we're going to have. I think it's one that we hit on a ton in the Christian faith, in the walk with the Lord, where we talk about the word righteousness. We talk about you have to be righteous. You have to do all of these things to be righteous with the Lord. And then I think sometimes we misunderstand what that actually means as a believer. You know, for me, it was such a journey that I had to go on and understand and learn what righteousness was. So I'm going to ask you a few questions and just let you dive into some of your journey of what righteousness is. But starting with this first question, which I think is such a priority when it comes to this topic, is what role does faith play in righteousness for a believer?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And obviously it's a great first place to start out. And I'd like to say, even before I think of that, the reason why I'm so happy that we're talking about this is because this conversation, me believing and understanding and becoming aware of what righteousness actually means for me as a believer, has been the most life-changing revelation in the last 4 years of my life. And if someone would have told me the righteousness that was in me growing up, I would have saved myself a lot of mistakes, a lot of wrong decisions. I would have saved myself from a lot of cyclical sin, habitual sin. And so to answer your question, the role that faith plays in righteousness, I think the role that faith plays is everything. I would say first, just like with Abraham, We become righteous by faith at the moment of salvation. And Abraham caught hold of that before Jesus actually came down as a man, because he believed that God was who he says that he was. And because of that, he received righteousness by faith. And to me, the easiest way to explain righteousness to someone, maybe one of my students who just decided to believe, is that God now sees you as he sees his son, that you have the righteousness that Jesus had in you the second that you believe, the second that you become a believer. The same righteousness that Jesus had, that's actually what you have. Even when you think about Galatians 2:20, that we have been crucified with Christ, and now it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. You think about 2 Corinthians 5:17, which is so simple, but one of my favorite scriptures, which is the old has gone and the new has come. Those who belong to Jesus are new creations, that he's given us a new mind, a new heart. And so I think that faith is how we receive righteousness. And then I would also say faith is how we continue. The continual decision to believe leads to the continual manifestation of righteousness in our lives.
I love that. And I agree with you completely. Like, if I would have understood what this meant, it would have saved me a lot of headaches. Like, the reality that I am fully righteous the moment that I accept Christ into my life. Like, it is by believing and by faith alone that we are made righteous. And like you said, it creates this new identity, which means because we are a new creation, we therefore have to have a new nature. Right? Like, you have to have a new nature. So like you said, I love the way you brought it up, is this faith manifests as righteousness, as the righteousness of Christ. And so that's such a reality of what we get to live in our freedom and righteousness in Christ. And for me, it was such a big issue because I'm not big on the Enneagram, but I know what I am. I'm a 3, which is like the achiever. So I was like, constantly, I've got to be doing this right. I've got to be following the rules. I can't make mistakes. And then when I would make mistakes, I like had the thought process of the Incredible Hulk, you know, the incident timer that he has, days since incident. And
100%.
The moment I made a mistake, my righteousness is back to 0. I'm starting over, and I have to earn that righteousness back. I have to earn back all the work that I just did went out the window. And it was such a problem for me. But like you said, we are by faith righteous. Which I think is so important for us to be in that understanding.
And it's important that I continue to remind myself that this is kind of how I look at it. If I were to teach a young person, is the second that you believe in Jesus is the second that very second that you now have his righteousness in you, and nothing that you do can take that away. That's how I would explain it. Nothing that you can do can take that away, because then they might ask me, well, if I don't have faith, then have I lost my righteousness? No, the second that you believed in Jesus, you gained his righteousness in you, a new nature, just like what you were saying. And that's where I think the picture of circumcision is so good, where Paul says, literally, your old sin nature has been cut off. It has been cut off and it has gone away with. But I would say that even though you can never lose it, that after that moment, you will see yourself begin to live in the righteousness that you have by continuing to believe. But you still can't lose it, because if your actions didn't get you righteousness, then your actions can't take away your righteousness. And that was really, really big for me to understand.
That's
but
amazing.
If you want to see righteousness play out in your life, you have to continue to believe every day that I have the righteousness of Jesus in me. And as you believe that, you begin to really, really live that out.
I love that. And it is actually so important. And it's about awareness. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like this thought process of when Jesus is inside of you, when you accept him, you have his righteousness. When you become aware of that, the fruit of that righteousness now produces in your life. You know,
Yes.
it's not always, it can be instantaneous. I've seen people accept Jesus and they're so aware of what everything Jesus has given them, and they operate in that place completely and fully. And then some people, Jesus breaks some stuff off of them right away, but then they lose that awareness of that they're fully free and maybe are stuck in some areas. But like you said, that doesn't mean that they're not righteous anymore.
Exactly.
It leads me back to this story before we jump into the next question in Luke chapter 18, where there's two men. There's a tax collector and there's a Pharisee. And the Pharisee basically says, thank God that I'm righteous. Thank God I'm not a tax collector. Thank God I'm not like other people think I'm all these things. And then the tax collector is over on the other side of the temple, beating his chest. He won't even look up to heaven. It doesn't say that he stopped collecting taxes. He was still in the midst of collecting taxes. And he said, Father, have mercy on me because I am a sinner. And Jesus said, I tell you the truth. He says, very truly, I tell you. Anytime Jesus says, very truly, I tell you, or I tell you the truth, pay attention. He says that the man who was a tax collector was justified, which means righteous with God, by God. Wow. Not the man who acted righteous. So it's so key to understand that our actions actually have no bearing on whether we're righteous or not. But again, like we don't want to make it like all grace, right? There still is a reality of you are a new creation. Let's live out of that place. Let's not just, oh, Jesus got me. That's kind of a false sense of security, right?
Well, and I would say exactly to that, something that even God worded it the other day for me in such a simple way, because I was trying to think, how do I explain righteousness to kids? Because that's what I was thinking. And God, and I felt like the Lord said that your actions do not determine your righteousness, but your actions reveal what you believe about yourself.
Ooh, that's so good.
That's what he said. That's what I felt like he said to me, is that your actions do not change whether you are righteous or not, because once you receive the righteousness of Jesus Christ, nothing can take that away. But your actions do reveal. So if I see a student or even myself begin to act in habitual sin, let's maybe even take an area or the struggle of pornography. If I see someone begin to struggle in that just reveals to me, oh, this person doesn't know who they are when it comes to purity.
That's so good.
It does not mean that, oh, I see a kid struggle with pornography, oh, they aren't pure. No. If they have the righteousness of Jesus Christ, they have purity within them. But it does reveal to me, oh, this student doesn't know that they are pure. This student doesn't believe that they are pure, because if they did believe that, their actions would reveal that. And that kind of helped me. That kind of helped me understand even the whole conversation about the grace and stuff like that. Is our actions are just revealers, really, but they are not determiners.
That's so good.
To our identity.
I love that. I mean, to me, that's so, that I'm going to be taking that and inputting that into myself and into my own heart, because the reality of the situation is our actions will show what we believe about ourselves and what we believe about Jesus, what he did for us and what he did in us. And so that really kind of leads me to this next question. I'm going to jump into, how do righteous acts fit into our righteousness of Christ as a follower of Christ, which you kind of touched on. So let's touch on a little bit more of what it looks like for us as believers. How can we become more aware of, our purity, for your example that you just used, so that our actions then begin to develop and our fruit begins to show that righteousness that's already within us?
Yes. I would say that the answer to this question, I think, was one of the most life-changing things for me when I first moved to Ventura. And I would say from about 7th grade to right after I graduated high school, I was stuck in this constant cycle of addiction to pornography. And so it was exactly what you described in the beginning, when it was like, okay, I mess up, I screw up. Okay, God, please forgive me, and I'm so sorry. I'm never going to do this again. And then I make myself feel bad for a couple of days because I think I deserve it. And then after a couple of days go by, or a week, and I'm counting up the days that I haven't screwed up, it's like, man, you know what? I'm actually pure. Like, I'm living righteous. I'm doing good. And then the second that I think I'm doing good, the second that I fall back down again, and then it's the exact same cycle again, where I am thinking that I'm pure based off of my actions, or not pure based off of my actions. And it only led to more sin in that area. It only led to more negative habits, because I was just trying so hard to stop and reach righteousness and reach purity, rather than just believing that it's already within me. And so I would say that if a believer desires to live righteously, which I think is, if someone were to ask me what it means to be a Christian, it would be to be with Jesus and then be like Jesus. That's what it'd be like. So I desire to be like Jesus. And so when you ask, what do we do to become more aware, if awareness does lead to righteousness, I think it honestly, and I know it sounds so simple, but it just starts in soaking yourself with truth. You have to know who you are. You have to know who you are, and who you are is determined by God. So I'm going to look to his words in the word. And that was the biggest thing when I came to Ventura. Every time Tracy became my accountability partner, and every time I would tell him that I messed up, Tracy was the first person to, rather than try to, tell me all the things that I need to do to, not look at pornography or not mess up or whatever. He just looked at me in the eyes and said, Carter, you're pure.
Yeah.
You're righteous. You have purity within you. And I go, whoa, what are you talking about? No, I don't. I just did this, or I just did this, giving him all of these reasons why I'm not. And then Tracy, no. Hey, Jesus, the cross, the resurrection is much, much bigger than the mistakes that you've made. Stop trying to stack up your mistakes as evidence to why the righteousness of Jesus is not within you. You receive the righteousness by faith. And so Tracy would tell me, he goes, hey, you need to believe that you're pure. You need to go spend time with Jesus. You need to go dig in his word. And I would literally, I would begin to read the word of God and what Paul says about who we are in Jesus. And I would just grab it and cling on to it. And I would tell myself, Carter, this is who you are. And I would look at the mirror and tell myself, Carter, this is who you are. And anytime I was feeling temptation, I would begin to remind myself, Carter, you're pure. You're pure. Not Carter, don't do this. Don't do this. You can't do this. You can't do this. Just, Carter, you're pure. You're pure. Don't forget who you are. Because that's what Pastor Vic said the first day of our retreat at the Bible college. He said that we only sin because we forget who we are. We only sin.
That's so good.
Because we forget who we are. That's the only reason why we sin.
Yeah.
And so I just began to believe that I was who Jesus said that I was. And no joke, it's been 4 years since I've even looked at anything like that. My desires began to change. The temptation began to change. It was like it no longer had a hold on me. Not because I went 50 days without looking at pornography and then, okay, I think I finally made it, but because I just began to believe that I was already pure. And then because I believed that, but you have to know it from the word. And that's what, it says. It says faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of God.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such a reality, because so many of us in this walk and in this Christian world, we lean into the law, and it's not it's not really intentional. We're not trying to force people to follow a set of rules, but we are trying to force people to look a certain type of way, because if you don't look a certain type of way, then how is God ever going to use you, or whatever that looks like? And I realized that was happening to me, and I was doing that myself. I mean, I remember specifically, I was laying in bed in the fall of 2018. I was weeping. I mean, weeping. I asked God for forgiveness for the thing I was weeping about like a week and a half before this situation.
Yeah.
And God sat me down. He goes, Cooper, what are you crying about? He said, well, Cooper, what are you even crying about? I'm like, God, you know what I'm crying about. You know what I did to you? And he's like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. And God doesn't, and here's the thing that I learned the hard way, which you'd think you'd learn it the easy way, because you see Jesus asking his disciples questions all the time when he already knows the answer to it. But the question wasn't to reveal to me, or for me to tell him something, but I was like, I'm like, God, I did this, this, and this. And he's like, do you know what it says? As far as the east is from the west, into the sea of forgetfulness, like you are the fullness of who I am. Like you need to understand, and this is what brought me on this journey. You need to understand what righteousness is. You need to understand that you are righteous. And when you begin to understand that you are already righteous, your actions will change. It's like so many people look at James and say, oh, well, it's works that are going to show your faith. Yes, your works will show your faith, not the other way around.
That's great.
Your faith is shown by the fruits you produce. But I'm not going to be obedient to Jesus if I don't believe or have faith that he is who he says he is. You know what I mean? And if I don't realize who I am in that, then there's going to be a disconnect, and I'm going to look at the law and I'm going to be like, well, I know that Jesus is, that says he's the Son of God. So I got to do all these things that he has to do. And here's what Paul says in Galatians. He says, I think it's Galatians 5. It says, if you fall back into the law, if you fall back into trying to do things the right way, you will be cut off from Christ. Like when we focus on our actions instead of our faith in Christ, Paul says you will be cut off. I don't want to be cut off from Christ. Like, that's not what I want. And so what that means is we have to focus, like you said so eloquently, on our identity based on who Christ is and his righteousness in us. That is so good. So for me, as I sit here, thanks, man. For me, as I sit here and think about what all this means and what I process, like for you, what do you believe righteousness actually means for us as believers?
Well, I would say righteousness is the nature of Jesus. And then I would say righteous acts are just the acts of Jesus, because righteousness is found in God. And because we think I've thought so often in the past, there's almost two sections in my life. I'm either good or I'm bad. I'm good or I'm bad. And depending on what I do, I'm going to put myself in that box. Oh, today was a bad day. Oh, today was a good day. But in the eyes of God, it's either righteous or you're a sinner. It's either saved or unsaved. It's either Jesus or not. And so the second that you're in this, the second that you believe, you've now hopped sections, and you are now in that category of righteous and of Jesus and of saved. And so if a student or a kid asked me what righteousness meant, I would tell them that righteousness was the nature and the identity of Jesus. Everything that was in Jesus, his nature, his mind, and his heart, that is righteousness in its whole, because Paul says in Colossians that Jesus was the image of the invisible God. So if you want to know what God is like, if you want to know what God looked like, if you want to know how God speaks, how he walks, how he talks, who he hangs out with, look at the life of Jesus. And so I would say that, if this water bottle represented Jesus and his nature on the inside, that the second that you believe, that is all now poured within you.
Yeah.
That's how I would explain righteousness. And the more that you believe that, the more that you'll live like Jesus.
Yes.
But
And
it takes,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it takes a lot of humility, I'm understanding, to believe that you are righteous because of Jesus. It takes, humble yourself to the work of Jesus. And what I mean by that is exactly what you were saying, Coop. I'll mess up, and sometimes I'll feel so discouraged. I'll feel maybe guilty or maybe even shameful. And it's like, Carter, the more you get stuck thinking about that just reveals the condition of pride in your mindset, because you can't stop looking at your own mistakes. Take your eyes off of your actions and put your eyes on me, and be willing. And that's why I believe it takes humility to receive grace. It takes humility to believe that I'm righteous. If maybe I just made a mistake, and then right there in that moment I go, God, thank you that that's not who I am. That's not who I am, because you're within me. That has nothing to do with who I am. It takes the practice of humility, because it's just so much easier to continue to get discouraged at maybe your own mistakes, because you think you deserve it.
Oh, dude, I feel that on such a personal level. And I feel like so many people who are going to be listening to this are going to feel that on a real personal level. It's like, I've messed up again, God, how many times? And the thing I love about this is Jesus said himself, how many times when Peter asked, am I supposed to forgive somebody 7 times? And Jesus like, no, 70 times, 7 times.
Come on.
A day. Like, when we do that, what people don't realize is he's not using a number. He's not saying 490 times and then you're good. He's actually saying the number 7 is to completion. You're supposed to forgive completely every single time they make a mistake against you. And that is not a picture necessarily of, that's a picture of what we're supposed to do with one another, but it's also a picture of what God does with us completely. Yes. Full of him, full of righteousness. So when we sit there and go, well, we messed up this many times, or we did this, or we did, God is going, no, you're missing it. You're righteous right here. And you're going to continue to mess up until you believe the reality that I've created for you. You live in a new reality. You're in the business of bringing heaven to earth, not earth to heaven. So you're in a new reality. You're seated in heavenly places. And people go to Revelation like, no sin can enter heaven. That's truth. Well, guess what? As a believer, I'm seated in heavenly places already. So when I mess up, I don't lose my seat in heaven, because Jesus already died for that sin.
Oh, wow.
So my righteousness is there. And it just, bro, you're just blowing my mind with how exciting this is. And I'm hoping that that people who are listening to this are understanding the freedom that they already have. Paul says, where sin abounds, grace abounds even more. Now, when you understand that, when you grasp that, that's not a free pass to just do whatever you want. It's actually an understanding of, that's not who I am. I'm actually, grace empowers me to be Christ on earth, because I'm seated with him in heavenly places, bringing heaven to earth. It's such an exciting understanding. And man, you've eloquently put it so good. So I appreciate that.
Man, that's what I love what you said about us being seated in heaven. That's fantastic. I'm gonna remember that. And that's what I think has understanding righteousness in a simple way is simply seeing ourselves the way that God sees us in our current moment. And I think the more that we see ourselves through his eyes, the more that we understand, oh wow, that's not who I am. This is now who I am.
Yeah.
And how he sees us seated up in heaven, Oh my gosh, if we fully understood that.
Yes. How much freedom, how much
Yes.
responses would our responses be different, you know?
Yes.
We wouldn't fall into, because as human beings, we can fall into cycles of sin, like we were both talking about us doing. But when we grasp the reality of who we are, those cycles are broken. And the cycle becomes, Judah Smith said this years ago, but he said, the best place for you to be the moment after you sin is right next to Jesus. Don't run from him.
Oh,
don't say, I'm not good enough for you. Don't do
good.
Just get right next to him, because he is your righteousness anyway. And guess what? He's going to open his arms and remind you of who you are. Man, so thank you so much for sharing that. And as we close here for this next 2 minutes, man, I want you to share your heart, whether it's on righteousness, whether it's on some practical encouragement, or even something that God's revealed to you outside of the topic we're talking about today.
Yeah. I think I feel led to share something that was not even said by me. It was said by a pastor named Todd White, who I've listened to here and there. And Todd White is an incredible evangelist. He walks in the gifts of the Spirit, in healing, words of knowledge. The manifestation of the Spirit is all over his life. And he said himself, he goes, identity is every day.
Wow.
Every day. Every day I tell myself who I am, because the second that I think I already know is the second that I fall into some of the same old habits.
Wow.
And so just a practical piece of advice and wisdom is the reason why it's so important for us to soak ourselves in truth and to remind ourselves who we are is because of the many things that we've said in this conversation, where the more that we know that, the more that our actions change. And so I remind myself who I am every single day. I remind myself that I'm pure, that I have the righteousness of Jesus within me. And I have seen my life change more than ever before, just because of those simple reminders. And so I just say to you guys, if you're looking for the righteousness of Jesus to take manifest in your life, then remind yourself of who you are and who he is every single day from the Word of God, and just watch your life change little by little.
That's so good. Carter, that was an amazing, amazing conversation. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you.
Bro, I love you. Can't wait to come back out and see you. It'll be soon.
Yeah, I love you too, Coop.
Thank you for joining us this week on More Than Mondays. I hope that conversation encouraged, challenged, and shifted your perspective as we begin this week together. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can get our newest episodes every Monday at 8 a.m.